What is up, everybody, and welcome to FLW Videos. In today's episode, I have a very exciting topic to talk about. A couple of weeks ago, I uploaded a video that was the top 20 Pokemon worth powering up in Pokemon Go. And I ended up getting a lot of comments saying, well, what if I didn't have access to that legendary? What if I didn't have access to that Community Day exclusive move? And that's going to breed this idea. We're going to be talking about the top 20 budget Pokemon worth powering up. So what is a budget Pokemon? Well, generally speaking, number one, they cannot be legendary, they cannot be mythical. And then something else that I decided to add into it is the simple fact that they cannot be on this list for an exclusive move. Maybe think about something like Mamoswine, for example. It ended up having the exclusive move Ancient Power, but that is not what makes it good, so it is still eligible for this list. And then the final thing that I wanted to take into consideration was pseudo-legendary Pokemon. I thought I might as well not include them for the simple fact that they are generally on the rarer side. I do have a couple of exceptions that I will put towards the end of the video. Coincidentally, we are ordering it by CP, so some of them will be towards the end of the video. So definitely make sure that you stick around for that. I'm super excited about this. We, of course, have a lot of Pokemon to go ahead and get into. If you enjoy this type of content, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe. But without further ado, let's go ahead and get into the budget Pokemon. I am so excited to get into this list. Into the number 20 spot is Breloom. So when we talk about Breloom from a budget perspective, we are not going to take a look at it from the grass typing. That's because it has an exclusive move known as Grass Knot that makes it really good. But hey, we're not here to talk about exclusive moves, we're here to talk about budget Pokemon. Specifically speaking, as far as the fighting type is concerned, it has Counter and Dynamic Punch, two of the best moves that you can have for a fighting type. And then simultaneously, it has an attack stat of 241, which is technically higher than Machamp. It's just a little bit more of a glass cannon, but if you are looking for a good budget fighting type Pokemon, I would highly recommend you to use Breloom. Up next is Honchkrow. Now, Honchkrow is going to be one of the few that we talk about, one of the more ideal ones, and that's because it's a solid Pokemon from two different typings. When you take a look at it from the dark, you're talking about a top 5 option. When you take a look at it from the flying type, a top 5 option. It also has Sky Attack, which is great for any type of flying type attacker. It has an amazing attack stat at 243. And regardless of that, yes, you will have to have a Sinnoh Stone, but as many of you know, I mean, you can find this type of Pokemon or the pre-evolution all over the place. Murkrow is just everywhere, so that's not going to be the problem, but once you can get yourself a Sinnoh Stone, I would highly recommend Honchkrow. Up next is Hariyama. So Hariyama is a really cool option that I personally think gets overlooked from the fighting type perspective. And for any newer player out there or any budget type player, this is a Pokemon that is going to perform very well for you. It has Counter, it has Dynamic Punch, and secondarily, check this out. It has an amazing stamina stat, which allows it to stay in the fight for a very long period of time. Sure, you're not going to do as much damage as something like a Machamp, for example, but you are going to be able to stay in the fight for a long time, and of course save on revives. For Leafeon, yes, you are going to have to use the Mossy Lure module to be able to get it, but at the same time, if you haven't used your naming trick, you can use that to be able to grant access to at least one of them. I think it's a solid option from the grass typing. Pinsir. Now, Pinsir is going to be a beast from that bug typing. I like it mostly for the fact that that attack stat really stands out. And then secondarily, you're not going to have to worry about evolving this. You're not going to have to make sure you have at least 125 candies just to get to a Pinsir. Because it doesn't have an evolution line, you can just catch this out in the wild and have it ready to go, and it is one of the best bug type attackers. Moving up the list, up next is Roserade. Now, Roserade is easily the king of all budget Pokemon. We are talking about a Pokemon that takes the number 1 spot from two different typings. Number 1 from the grass type because of the move Grass Knot, and then of course number 1 from the poison typing as well. It has a very high attack stat. Once again, sure, you're going to have a Sinnoh Stone, but I would say that Roselia is fairly easy to find, so the candy side, you don't have to worry about it. And this is one of the Pokemon that made it on just the top 20 Pokemon to power up. And anytime you have like a budget Pokemon, like a non-legendary and everything like that, that is able to just propel to the number 1 spot from its respective typing, is easily one of the best budget options that you could have. Scizor. Now, Scizor is an interesting one. I put it on the list because of the bug typing, but we already have something like a Pinsir on this as well. But simultaneously, I thought about this a little more, and it does kind of make sense to put it on from the steel typing as well, because beyond something like a Scizor, there's really not a lot of solid options from the steel typing, at least that don't fall into a category like an exclusive move, a legendary, a mythical. Once you get past all of that, like a Metagross with Meteor Mash, you're going to be left with a budget option, and I do think that Scizor is going to be the answer to it. Definitely cool. You are going to have a metal coat for this, but I don't personally think that that's going to be that big of a deal to hold you back. Weavile. Weavile is so awesome from two different typings. We've got a top 3 performer from the dark and a top 4 performer from the ice typing. And anytime you have something like that with an incredible attack stat, an incredible set of moves, it's easily going to be the best budget option that you can have. Of course, once again, a Sinnoh Stone. I have to say Generation 4 is just all over this list because they have just such high performance, especially through that Sinnoh Stone route. So if you do not have yourself a Weavile, I would definitely try to focus on it. Flareon. So Flareon's going to be an interesting one from the fire typing because it is not necessarily going to be the #1 option, but once you get past legendaries and exclusive moves, it is one of the best options. Check this out. It has an attack stat of 246. It actually has a fairly good moveset as well with Overheat. That's what you want besides Blast Burn, of course. So it is definitely a solid option that I would recommend you to have. This is Machamp. Easily one of my favorite Pokemon to have in the game. It's been dominant ever since the beginning. I believe you can classify it as a budget option because it has so many accessible points. I mean, it's literally the #1 performer from the fighting type. Counter and Dynamic Punch, it has the ideal moveset. See, it actually technically has a little bit lower of an attack stat than something like a Breloom, but it makes up for it by having a pretty decent stamina. It's just a really good overall Pokemon, and once again, one that is easily in the top 20 list that you would want to power it up. So definitely excited to include it on this list. Alakazam. Now, Alakazam is a very interesting one because the Psychic typing has a lot of powerful Pokemon when you talk about something like Mewtwo, a Zelf, but they are legendary Pokemon, so if you are looking for a budget option, we'll have another one on this list as well. Maybe you can predict it. I think Alakazam is a lot of fun to use. #1, check this out. Oh my gosh. An attack stat of 271. Something else that's cool is it does have the best moveset possible with Confusion and Future Sight. It is going to be a little bit on the glacier side, but you're going to love using Alakazam if you can get yourself one, and something that I'm personally very excited to include on the list. Electivire. Once again, we have another Generation 4 Pokemon. It will require a Sinnoh Stone, but check this out. 249. So from a budget perspective, when you talk about it from the electric typing, I mean, it's literally the second best performer, only behind something like a Raikou, for example. So if you're looking for a non-legendary, Electivire is going to be the option. Gardevoir. Now, I was a little on the fence to whether or not to include this, but I wanted to put it up here not for the Psychic typing, but for the Fairy. It has a double Fairy type moveset with Charm and Dazzling Gleam. It's also the #1 Fairy type attacker. Now I get it. It is a little bit on the rarer side, so I was a little on the fence. So maybe the better budget option could be Togekiss. Togekiss is going to be a little bit behind Gardevoir in performance, but it is not a bad Fairy type attacker. It has an okay attack stat. I felt like those two needed to be a little bit more of a combo than anything, just because they, I don't know if I could classify Gardevoir as a budget option, so I wanted to go ahead and put in Togekiss as well. Glaceon is easily one of my favorite evolutions in this game for the fact that it is in the top 3 from an ice type attacking perspective. Not only that, regardless of the moveset that you have, all of the movesets tend to be pretty good in performance. Of course, you would want to get the ideal moveset. But the reason why I bring that up is because this could be a very good option for you to save some TMs and not have to TM all the time. That could easily be a benefit that's not necessarily going to get mentioned all that often. So I wanted to bring it up. Glaceon is so solid from that ice typing. Espeon, another evolution. So Espeon, of course, from that Psychic typing, it has an attack stat of 261. It is within the top 5 from a Psychic type perspective. It's also pretty much up there with Alakazam. Of course, a little bit more of a budget option just because of the candy cost and the accessibility of finding Eevee. It is a solid Pokemon. It's something that I would personally recommend as an option if you are looking for a budget player. Up next, we've got Rampardos. Now, Rampardos is a little bit tough to put on this because Yes, it's definitely a little bit on the rarer side, but at the same time, it's 50 candy to be able to evolve it. Cranidos is starting to spawn a little bit more. It's also more accessible in the eggs. So I think we can go ahead and pull Rampardos into this list and leave something out like a Garchomp, for example. I'm not finding any Gibble. But anyways, it is the number 1 from the rock type. Check that out, an attack stat of 295. That is amazing. This Pokemon dominates from that rock typing perspective. It also has a very good moveset to include as well. So I'm excited to include it on this list. You may disagree with it just from a rarity perspective, but I do think as time goes on, it will easily become a little bit more accessible. Mamoswine, what a beast. Oh man, this Pokemon is literally the number 1 from the ice typing. And then secondarily from the ground, it's within the top 3. A lot of people forget about it, but that's just because it's so dominant from that ice typing. It has a solid attack stat, and yes, it was a Community Day Pokemon, but its Community Day moveset is not why it's on this list. That ended up being Ancient Power, which is a rock type move. We're talking about it from the ice typing, good to go. From the ground typing, good to go. I think it's a solid investment if you want to have a Pokemon that is good at 2 different types. Rhyperior, another generation 4 Pokemon with a Sinnoh Stone. Rhyperior is really good from the ground typing as well as from the rock typing. It has a good moveset from both sides, so you can end up looking at it like a budget option where you can have ground type attacker and then of course rock as well. You can rover between the two. It has a solid set of stats. Check this out, it's technically in the top 10 overall as far as its rank is concerned. It has very high stamina, a very high attack. It just gets outclassed by a couple of different things like a Groudon from the ground typing and then Garchomp as well. Then from the rock, you're talking about like Tyranitar, Rampardos. So it is being beat, but it's being beat by the absolute best in the game. So it does get left in the dust a little bit, but it is still a good solid budget option. Up next is Dragonite. Now, I was so on the fence as to not include it, but the reason why I decided to include Dragonite is because if you think about it, there's really not a lot of good options from a budget perspective from the dragon typing. There are a lot of solid legendary Pokemon, for example, and then maybe something like a Salamence, but only Salamence with Outrage, and Outrage was the exclusive move for Salamence. Dragonite did get a Community Day, but it got Draco Meteor as the exclusive move, so if you take all of that away, you've got Dragonite, which is one of the best dragon type attackers besides legendaries, besides exclusive moves, and it's going to have the Idol moveset already. You can already grant access to Outrage, and in the inclusion of special research that allowed you to be able to evolve up to a Dragonite just from doing the special research, I do think makes it a little bit more accessible, so I wanted to go ahead and include it on the list. Oh man, that was so hard to get out. So many Pokemon covered in today's video. Hopefully you got a lot of value out of it and you've kind of got something in your mind as to what you want to see from a budget perspective. I of course want to know what you think is the best budget Pokemon, so make sure to put that in the comment section below. And if you have another idea that you would like for me to do for a top 20, let me know in the comments section below and I will see you next time. If you want to develop a deeper connection, I would highly recommend you to check out Patreon. We've got a lot of really cool things going on over there. Check out all of these supporters that we have. We are almost up to 100. We are also posting some special content, some behind the scenes work. And if that is the type of thing that interests you, I would highly recommend you to check it out.